Mike Pence is the 48th Vice President of the United States, the second highest office in the executive branch. As Vice President, he's also an officer in the legislative branch of the U.S. government, serving as the President of the Senate, in which he has the authority to cast the tie-breaking vote. As he should be, he's a key advisor to the president and at times stands in for him, representing our entire nation. Which is what made his feckless response to a simple but important question during this week's vice presidential debate with Senator Kamala Harris so amazing. Just before the debate ended, the moderator reminded Pence that President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. She asked that if Joe Biden won the election and Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would Pence's role and responsibility be as vice president? What would he, Mike Pence, do? In his 2-minute and 14-second response, Pence talked about his confidence in winning the election, the military, the economy, our nation's energy resources, the courts, law enforcement, Hillary Clinton, spying, the Mueller report, Trump's impeachment, mail-in voting, and the FBI. The only thing he didn't mention was what he, Vice President Mike Pence, would do if Trump refused to accept the results of the election in a peaceful transfer of power. Here's the thing. Mike Pence isn't about to tell Trump anything he doesn't want to hear. It's the basic rule of survival in the Trump orbit. But back in 2016, that is exactly what Mike Pence told 60 Minutes he would do, saying, quote, "I promise you that when the circumstances arise where I have a difference on policy or presentation, I would have no hesitation, were I privileged to be vice president, to walk into the president's office, close the door, and share my heart," end quote. What's in your heart, Mike Pence, about the basic tenet of democracy, a peaceful transfer of power, and the departure from office at the end of your term? It's a simple question, but one on which the success of a democracy hinges. What door is Pence leaving open and why? What political advantage is gained by not committing to accepting the results of an election? It's a hypothetical question, but as hypothetical questions go, it's a really easy one. And it's relevant because Mike Pence's boss, Donald Trump, made it relevant. And to be clear, when Joe Biden was asked in the presidential debate if he would accept the results of the election, he said yes. It's Democracy 101. Anyone who cannot answer this question correctly doesn't deserve your vote.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.